Action from Portland, Indiana tonight as a mother is charged in the death of her 5-year-old son.
The coroner says Christian Crossland died from strikes to the head and mouth, and he was found seriously malnourished. 27-year-old Chelsea Crossland is charged with murder and neglect of a dependent causing death. She told police the boy fell, but court documents say Crossland did not immediately call for help and talked about disposing his body. Further investigation showed the boy was malnourished, dehydrated, and had numerous bruises. His death last week sent shockwaves through the Portland community.
The breaking news from Wayne 15 stunned everyone in Portland, Indiana. It wasn't just the loss itself that devastated the community, it was what it revealed. A young child, once raised in a stable and loving home by family friends, Brittany and Trevor Easton, was suddenly gone. His name was Christian Crossland, a cheerful little boy whose life changed completely when he was returned to the care of his biological mother in early 2022. In just 74 days, that warm and familiar world vanished. And so did Christian. The early reports didn't speak of an accident or illness. Instead, the details raised serious concerns. Medical professionals noted that Christian arrived at the hospital in an extremely poor state. His body showed signs of long-term mistreatment, weakened, malnourished, and unresponsive. His mother told officials he had simply fallen. But court documents and follow-up investigations revealed a different story, one of delayed medical attention, unanswered questions, and serious doubt about what really happened in those final days. The community's response was immediate and emotional. Neighbors came together in prayer, lighting candles in Christian's memory at Hudson Family Park. Many spoke not just of grief, but of disbelief, how such a tragedy could unfold in silence. Some were disturbed by what they saw online afterward, a lack of visible concern from the one person who should have been most affected. Christian's story isn't just another headline. It's the life of a young boy who brought joy to everyone around him. A boy who once knew love, laughter, and comfort before it was taken away. If you're watching this from Indiana, the US, the UK, Canada, or anywhere in the world, take a moment to comment where you're tuning in from. Subscribe, like, and share. Because awareness matters. It's how we protect vulnerable children and keep stories like Christian's from being forgotten. Christian Crossland was just 5 years old, a little boy with a bright smile and a cheerful personality. Those who knew him say he was joyful, full of energy, and always ready with a laugh. He deserved love, protection, and a safe place to grow. He spent most of his short life in Portland, Indiana, a small, peaceful town where families looked out for one another. It was in this quiet town that Christian found a home with Brittany and Trevor Easton, family friends who stepped in when his mother, Chelsea Crossland, couldn't care for him. The Eastons gave Christian stability. They loved him deeply, raised him like their own son, and gave him the care every child needs. Christian thrived in their home. He was happy, healthy, and safe. The bond between Christian and the Eastons wasn't temporary. It was real. They celebrated his milestones, comforted him when he cried, and cheered him on as he grew. But everything changed in January 2022. That was when Chelsea, his biological mother, took Christian back. After years apart, she suddenly demanded custody. And from that moment, something felt wrong. Not much is publicly known about Chelsea's past, but what is known raises serious concerns. She had no stable record of parenting. There were red flags, questionable decisions, possible neglect, and troubling behavior. Still, she was allowed to take him. In just 74 days, Christian's life went from love to fear, from safety to silence. And the little boy who once had a bright future was gone. What happened during those weeks is heartbreaking, and the truth behind it is even worse. After years of living with Brittany and Trevor Easton, the only stable family he truly knew, Christian was suddenly placed under the care of his biological mother. No one knew it at the time, but this move would begin the final chapter of his young life. From the outside, everything might have seemed normal at first, but behind closed doors, Christian's life was changing fast, and not for the better. The love and attention he had received in the Easton home were replaced by neglect and silence. There were no more warm meals, no more daily hugs, no more laughter. Christian slowly began to disappear, not in a physical sense, but emotionally, mentally, and physically. Bit by bit, the little boy with the bright smile faded away. Neighbors later said they hardly saw him after Chelsea took him home. There were no birthday photos, no playdates, no signs of joy. It was as if Christian had been hidden, tucked away where no one could hear his cries for help. Isolation became his new reality. Chelsea stopped providing him with proper nourishment. Reports would later reveal that he was significantly underweight. His small frame, once full of life, was visibly deteriorating. His body was weakened. He was also lacking hydration, his health beginning to fail. This wasn't just neglect. It was a slow, silent form of suffering. Around the same time, visible signs of concern reportedly began to appear. Marks were noticed on his face and body, indicators that something might have been wrong. But no action was taken. Those closest to the situation either didn't see him enough or didn't recognize the warning signs. Whatever unfolded inside that home, it happened quietly, unnoticed. Christian was in distress, but no one was able to step in and help. In the final days of his life, Christian's condition appeared to grow more serious. He seemed physically weaker, and it's possible he was experiencing discomfort or fear. Those who later examined the case believe he may have been too unwell or too frightened to express what he was going through. It's deeply painful to consider the emotional and physical state he may have been in, isolated, vulnerable, and just 5 years old. Then came the morning Chelsea finally called for help. But it was already too late. She told police Christian had fallen in the bathroom and hit his head. She said she found him unresponsive. But there was one major problem with her story. The injuries didn't match a simple fall, and she had waited too long to call 911. The damage was already done. The little boy who once laughed in the Easton's living room was now lifeless on a stretcher. What happened over those 74 days remains difficult to fully understand. A child was removed from a stable, caring environment and placed into one where his well-being steadily declined. He was left without the support, care, and attention every child needs, until his health and spirit could no longer withstand the neglect. And on that final day, when Chelsea finally dialed for help, Christian was already gone. When first responders arrived at the scene, they quickly realized this was not just a routine call. Christian Crossland was unresponsive, and there was nothing they could do to save him. The boy was declared dead at the hospital, but the questions began immediately. Something about the scene wasn't right. Chelsea Crossland told the authorities that Christian had slipped in the bathroom and hit his head. But from the moment investigators entered the home, her story raised concerns. The officers noticed the environment. It wasn't just untidy. It was deeply neglected. The home looked unfit for any child to live in. There were signs of poor hygiene, clutter, and what appeared to be long-term disrepair. It painted a picture of a household in disarray. Most disturbing, though, was the way Chelsea behaved. She didn't seem panicked. She didn't ask the usual questions. Instead, her emotions were flat. Her answers were brief, her tone cold. Detectives noticed that she seemed disconnected from the seriousness of the situation. According to Chelsea, she had found Christian unconscious after his fall, but she didn't call 911 right away. There had been a delay, possibly hours. That delay raised alarms. Why would a mother wait to call for help if her son was badly hurt? If you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel. And let me know what you think about this case in the comments. I read every single one of them. As part of standard procedure, Christian's body was sent for examination. The coroner's early findings were alarming. Injuries were observed that didn't align with a simple fall. The extent of physical markings, especially around his face and torso, suggested ongoing harm, not just a single incident. And then, the issue of his weight. He was noticeably underweight for his age. His condition reflected signs of prolonged lack of proper nourishment. At this stage, police were careful. They didn't rush to conclusions, but they started putting the pieces together. Officers canvassed the neighborhood. They asked questions. When was the last time anyone saw Christian outside? Had anyone heard anything unusual? The sad truth emerged. No one had seen him much in recent weeks. He had simply disappeared from view. A few neighbors mentioned they hadn't seen the boy at all since early in the year. Investigators also began looking into past involvement from child services. There were hints of prior concerns, not just about Chelsea's ability to parent, but about her stability and decision-making. But there's no clear record that authorities had ever fully intervened. If any warnings existed, they weren't enough to stop what happened. This raised painful questions about whether the system missed signs that could have saved Christian's life. Meanwhile, Chelsea's behavior continued to raise questions for investigators. They reviewed her phone, internet activity, and social media presence. What they found added to their concerns. In the days following Christian's passing, there were no visible signs of public mourning or tribute. Instead, her posts appeared neutral, not reflecting the seriousness of the situation. Still, at this point, Chelsea had not been charged. The investigation was active, and law enforcement was gathering every piece of information they could. But word of the case spread quickly through Portland. The town was shaken. People who had once trusted her were now questioning everything. Vigils were being planned. The Eastons, though not publicly vocal yet, were reportedly devastated beyond words. The pressure on the authorities began to build. The community wanted answers and justice. As the investigation moved forward, detectives began to uncover what they feared all along: that Christian's death was not an accident, and that his suffering had gone on far longer than anyone imagined. The turning point came when police obtained access to Chelsea Crossland's digital history. Her phone, her social media accounts, and her private messages all became critical pieces of evidence. Investigators expected to find sorrow or concern. Instead, what they saw was chilling. There were no desperate messages for help, no signs of a grieving mother. Instead, Chelsea's social media activity in the days following her son's death showed a cold and casual tone. She continued to post unrelated content. She responded to comments. She even interacted with people online as if nothing had happened. This behavior alarmed detectives. It raised a critical question. How could any parent behave this way after losing a child? It didn't end there. As digital forensics moved deeper, more disturbing information came to light. Private messages revealed conversations in which Chelsea had allegedly mentioned delaying medical help. Even more shocking, there were reports that she considered hiding Christian's body instead of calling for assistance. These were not the words of a panicked mother. They were the thoughts of someone more focused on protecting herself than saving her child. While police processed this evidence, they turned to people in Chelsea's daily life: acquaintances, neighbors, and anyone who may have seen or heard anything. Statements began forming a clearer picture. Some people claimed they heard disturbing sounds coming from the home: crying, shouting, even silence that seemed unusual for a house with a young child. Others noted changes in Chelsea's behavior, describing her as distant and unbothered in the days following Christian's passing. There were also concerns from individuals who had seen Christian recently. They described a child who appeared weaker than before. Some recalled that he looked thinner, quieter, almost as if he had lost his spark. No one knew the full extent of what he was going through, but looking back, many wished they had asked more questions. While these witness accounts were heartbreaking, they also helped investigators build a timeline that pointed to a pattern of abuse, not just a single incident. Authorities now believe Christian had been suffering for weeks. His health had steadily declined. His injuries, his weight, and his physical state all pointed to long-term mistreatment. Then came the official examination results. The findings left little room for doubt. Christian had experienced extended periods without adequate nutrition. His body showed indications of repeated physical distress. These concerns weren't recent. They reflected a pattern of ongoing mistreatment. The report provided investigators with critical information. This was no longer just an unexplained situation. It was now being treated as a criminal case. As police built their case, Chelsea remained in the community, but pressure was mounting. Local residents were angry. They wanted answers, and they wanted justice. With mounting evidence, witness statements, and expert findings, detectives moved in. They had seen enough. In a quiet but decisive moment, Chelsea Crossland was taken into custody. She was charged with serious criminal offenses, including one related to the loss of a child and another involving failure to provide proper care. The town of Portland was left in disbelief. How could a mother allow this to happen? How could someone be so detached from their own child's suffering? Christian's story is not just about one person's actions. It's about the failure of many systems to protect him. And in those failures, a child was lost. A child who deserved better. A child who should still be here. Once the investigation concluded, the case moved swiftly into the legal system. Chelsea Crossland was officially charged with 2 grave offenses: murder and neglect of a dependent resulting in death. The charges reflected the seriousness of the evidence. This was not seen as an accident. Prosecutors made it clear They believed Christian had suffered intentionally, and that his death was both preventable and deliberate. As Chelsea entered the courtroom for the first time, many watched closely. Her appearance was plain. She looked distant, showing little emotion. She entered a plea of not guilty, but her lack of visible reaction didn't sit well with the public. Her demeanor was described by courtroom observers as flat, almost disconnected from the weight of the situation. For many, it was yet another sign of a woman who had failed to protect the child she brought into the world. The courtroom quickly became a place of tension. Reporters, local families, and grieving members of the community filled the benches. At the center of it all was the memory of a little boy who could no longer speak for himself. Outside the court, the town of Portland, Indiana, was deeply shaken. The community had come together in grief and anger. Parents, teachers, and neighbors gathered to remember Christian and to demand accountability. A prayer vigil was held at Hudson Family Park, where candles were lit in his name. Attendees spoke his name aloud, many with tears in their eyes. They shared prayers, sang softly, and promised to fight for children who couldn't protect themselves. During the trial, prosecutors presented a timeline built on evidence collected over weeks of investigation. Detectives testified to the condition of the home and the inconsistencies in Chelsea's statements. Forensic experts described the extent of Christian's injuries and the signs of prolonged neglect. The Eastons, though devastated, provided powerful testimony. They spoke about the life Christian had with them, a life filled with laughter, structure, and care. Their words painted a clear contrast between the love he once received and the suffering he endured in his final days. Photos, medical charts, and digital records were shown to the jury. Each detail was difficult to hear, but necessary to understand the full story. The courtroom sat in silence as the evidence unfolded. Many cried quietly. Others looked away, but no one could ignore the truth. In the end, the jury delivered a verdict, guilty on all counts. Chelsea Crossland was held fully responsible for the death of her son. The sentence handed down was severe. She would spend decades in prison. The judge called the case one of the most tragic and disturbing he had ever seen. In his final remarks, he emphasized that Christian had been completely defenseless and that the pain inflicted on him was cruel and sustained. The sentencing brought some closure, but it could never undo the loss. After the trial, the community channeled its grief into action. Christian Crossland's name became a symbol, a reminder of what happens when silence wins. A reminder that every child deserves to be seen, heard, and protected. In memory of Christian, many have made a promise to speak up when something feels wrong, to never assume someone else will handle it, and to believe children, always. Because justice is not just about punishment. It's about change. And Christian's story, as painful as it is, has the power to spark that change. Christian Crossland was more than a name in a headline. He was a 5-year-old boy full of light, playful, joyful, and deeply loved by those who truly knew him. In the comfort of the Easton home, he blossomed. He laughed freely, smiled often, and knew what safety felt like. But that warmth was torn away, and in its place came silence, fear, and unimaginable pain. The tragedy of Christian's death is not just in what happened, but in how it was allowed to happen. Systems designed to protect children failed to see the danger. Custody decisions ignored critical warning signs. And somewhere in the middle of paperwork, procedures, and legal limitations, a little boy lost his voice and his life. This is not about blame. It's about responsibility. About listening when something feels wrong. About noticing the small signs others overlook. And about choosing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Let Christian's story remind us of what truly matters. No child should suffer in silence. No warning sign should be brushed aside. And no life, no matter how small, should be forgotten. If you or someone you know suspects a child is being abused, say something. You might save a life. Like, comment, and subscribe to help bring more awareness to stories like Christian's. Because Christian Crossland mattered, and we will not forget.